Hello and welcome back to the SaaS Marketing Weekly podcast with me, your host, Ryan James. We are back in the studio with Jamie Skeels, the head of marketing at Rocket SaaS. Welcome back, Jamie.
Back in the studio.
Can't get rid of you.
I know.
Our most popular guest. We always get a lot of positive feedback about Jamie. He knows his onions, as someone said to me the other day. I'd agree with that. But anyway, we are talking about ABM. We've talked about ABM a few times on the podcast, but today Jamie's got somewhat of a controversial opinion about ABM, I would say. He was chatting to me in the office the other day, so I thought we'd get him on the pod, get him talking about his controversial opinion, which is all around should startups or small scale-up SaaS companies be running ABM? Do they understand what goes into ABM? Because those types of companies obviously have small marketing resources. Mm-hmm. Jamie's come from a big company in Cognizant that were doing ABM and put a lot of resources into it. So he's learned how to do ABM like properly, in inverted commas, and how perhaps startups and scale-ups just cannot do it that way. So should they be doing ABM at all? Is there a different way you should be going about ABM? But Jamie, have I introduced that correctly? What is your opinion on ABM for smaller businesses?
Yes, I actually think this is like a really important topic, basically, for startups, smaller businesses, especially smaller teams. So this is why I was quite keen. I kind of mentioned to you, I want to get this on the pod. Probably going to get loads of stick for it, but
I hope
whatever. So. Basically, the main thing I kind of wanted to get across was that if you're a small business, like you're a small SMB, you're a small startup, and you're seeing online that like you need to be doing ABM, like account-based marketing, and it's like this huge trend and everyone's talking about it and you should be doing it. My argument basically is that as a small startup or a small scale-up, yes, if you can run in a pure sense, pure ABM, where you're talking about like you have a one-to-many layer and a one-to-few layer in your ABM program and a one-to-one layer, and you go after all these big like tier one accounts and your programs for each with dedicated landing pages and ads and all that stuff for each account. If you can do that and you've got the resources and the team size and the budget, all that stuff, great. If you can do that, if you can achieve that, good for you. The bone I have at the moment is that I feel that a lot of kind of startups feel like they have to do ABM. And then what can happen is they look at it as ABM is the gold standard. But ABM means different things to different people. And I think what smaller businesses need to be aware of is what can they realistically achieve with the budgets they have, with the resources they have, with the team members they have. Because ABM is a resource intensive strategy if you follow it in the most pure sense. So sorry, you're on.
Well, I was going to say, so my kind of experience with ABM is that small businesses can do it. Because, so for example, a classic, so to probably describe ABM for the people that don't know what ABM is essentially kind of hand-picking companies that you think are good clients for you and going after them with targeted marketing campaigns. So using something like LinkedIn Sales Navigator to pick a list of, say, 100 companies that you think these would be a good fit for me. And then various different ways you can do ABM. You can invite them onto a podcast. You can invite them to be a guest as a webinar to build that relationship. You could send them a box of chocolates in the post with a little handwritten letter, say, hey, this is chocolate from us, just introducing us. Would you like to have a demo? So that's how I've always kind of understood ABM, because I've always come from a small business kind of startup scene. And that is manageable and achievable for a small team. Even one person could do that. But you've obviously come from Cognizant with massive marketing resources, so you've seen ABM done in a different way. And I know a lot of people that talk about ABM, they talk about it in the way that like Cognizant would do it. And then as a small business, you're kind of hearing that, okay, this is how you do ABM. And then it's like, oh, well, actually, I don't have the resources to do it. So, I mean, tell us, from a big company like Cognizant, what resources went into the ABM that you're talking about that you think is unachievable for small businesses?
Yeah, so I think this is kind of where we get to like the rub of it. So there's two bits I want to get to. So this bit where we talk about the resources angle, and then also the logic of focusing on a handful of accounts and how that applies to businesses. So let's start with the resources bit. So at Cognizant, like we were quite lucky, especially the the marketing and demand generation teams in terms of like, we had a huge marketing operations team that were excellent. We had like all specialisms across our marketing team, from content to product marketing to demand generation to ads to SEO to etc. So we had lots of resource in-house, and then we also had lots of tech. Like we had lots of like tech available to us, tools like multi-touch attribution tools like Hockey Stack and Dream Data, and then also other tools that like intent data tools like Qualified, etc. So what we were able to do, and I think what Cognizant was able to do that, like in terms of their ABM program, was they had the people and they had the tech to kind of bring together and orchestrate a really complex ABM program. And they've done a brilliant job of it. Like, I think like Tim Hughes there and Liam Collins really masterminded this, but they've built like a one-to-many layer, a one-to-few layer, and a one-to-one layer. And like, if you look at that, I think they've done a really good job in terms of trying to simplify it that as much as possible, but it's still a huge endeavor, because what they do is like, they're looking at, particularly when they're targeting like their one-to-few and one-to-many campaigns, they're looking at kind of the accounts that are showing signals, some relevant buying signals for Cognizant, and also like combining that with like ICP data, so like who's a good fit ICP for Cognizant, scoring those accounts, and then working on kind of workflows with sales. And it's very like it's data heavy, and it's resource heavy stuff.
So I think I was chatting to our colleague Joe in the office earlier about this today, actually, and he describes it quite well. He was like, if you do ABM without the resource and without the kind of the time and investment to basically research into these companies that you think could work with you, then even though you've handpicked, say, 100 companies that you think would be good for you, if you haven't got the budget for something like 6 Sense or Bombora that will cost you, I don't know, something like $100,000 a year, which is obviously out of budget for most small companies, then you're not going to get enough intent signals from those companies to actually know if they're in market and they could buy from you. So as the demand generation principle states, your audience there's a 5% chance that pool of people that you're going after are in market to buy from you. So if you're creating a very small list of just 100 companies and you haven't got the tools and the investment and the people and the time to get these signals, then it is still just a random 100 companies, and you can send them bottles of champagne and boxes of chocolates, but it doesn't make them in market.
This is the rub for me. This is where I get like a little bit kind of, this is where I get a bit energized.
This is the rub of the green. Is that a golfing term? This is the rub of the green,
where I can't tell you how many conversations I've had where someone will go, well, why don't we just like, there's 200 accounts. This is who we want to go after. Let's go after them, and let's like create campaigns just for them, and we'll get them these big wow accounts, like big enterprise accounts. We'll go after them and we'll do that. If you're a startup or scale up, in 90% of cases, maybe in some cases, that will be your market, and that's who you should go after, because that's actually who can buy from you. In 90% of cases, and I'm happy to be proved wrong here, but I don't think I will be, in 90% of cases, don't do that. Don't just pick 200 accounts that you want to work with and go after them. There's so many flaws in that thinking. And this is where I kind of get to the point about, like, if you look at it from a logical sense of view, if we have 200 accounts, and we apply that heuristic, sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower, but 5% of those are in market. So 200 accounts, what's that? So that's 10 accounts that are in market. That means that of those, like of that list, like that's 10 accounts that you could possibly win, like in the month, the quarter, etc. Right? That is such a small amount. Like, you're betting on such a small amount of companies that you could realistically win. When you factor in things like competition, timing, variables beyond your control, like they might already have their mind made up, all these things play in, and like you're giving yourself an impossible job. And so I think that's where some people think like we need to go super hyper targeted, and that's how we're going to grow. I would argue that's not the way to do it, because of general buying dynamics like I've just mentioned. So there's two sides to it, where I think listen, if you can do pure ABM and you can set it up in a way like I mentioned with Cognism earlier, great for you. Brilliant. Good for you. You've cracked it. Like, you've built a really complex and sustainable program. But for 90% of startups and scale-ups, I think they need to stop focusing on pure ABM and like advice that they see online a lot, and think about ABM in a bit of a different way. And we've talked about this a lot, where I think there's an alternative way to do ABM, or like maybe I call it like ABM Lite, but it's targeting in an account-based way and in a sustainable way that startups and scale-ups and small teams can actually activate.
Okay, so I know that you feel that, yes, small teams can do a kind of version of it. So let's talk about that. Let's say if you're a B2B SaaS company, you have a small marketing team with like 2 or 3 people. What is a better approach, rather than handpicking a few companies and doing some kind of webinar invites or whatever? What can they be doing?
Yeah. So this is where I'm probably going to get stick. So a lot of people will say this is an ABM, but what I believe is that, like, instead of doing like pure ABM, like I just mentioned in the way we've talked about, like, I think what's a much better route in terms of like a more dependable way to grow for a lot of startups, scale ups, and more manageable, is map out, and this is an exercise that we've done at Rocket SaaS. I think we mentioned it in a previous episode of the pod. Map out your ICP, your full ICP, like who you're going after, you're best served to work with. Map that out in like an actual, build a known universe of accounts. And you can do that with lots of tools now, tools like Clay. We also use Clay ourselves. You can lots of different data providers, but map out that kind of core ICP in an account list. And let's say that's a universe. That you have a universe of, let's say, 15,000 accounts that you can realistically win in the next kind of like month, quarter, year, etc. That's your ICP for now. Get that universe and target them in an account-based way, like I've just mentioned. So you can add that account list to your paid campaigns. You can start thinking about how you break that data down into other channels and go after them as well. But start there, and don't limit your reach for no reason, because of the reasons I just mentioned. Like, you can sort of try and grow your way to your goals from 200 accounts, or expand your reach, go after an account-based way. And then what I would do from there is, if we start targeting that universe of accounts in a way that we know these are the accounts we're going to focus on, then what you can do is use intent data, similarly to how we mentioned earlier, but do it in a sustainable way. If you're a small, like you're 2 or 3 person team, you haven't got a marketing ops team, you haven't got loads of tech set up, you haven't got all of the resources you need, focus on like maybe 1 or 2 pieces of intent data. So for example, like a really good example, this is going to be a bit of a plug, but I've not been paid to do this. So Fibbler, excellent, I think, for small teams. So you can use that to send directly all of your LinkedIn ad engagements. So say if you're targeting that list of accounts on LinkedIn, send all of your LinkedIn ad engagements to your HubSpot, your Salesforce, etc., and use that intent data to like contribute to like an engagement score or an account score. And then you can also use, I think the second piece that I would recommend just to get started, and this isn't exhaustive, but what I'm trying to get to here is like build something sustainable. Don't over engineer it first, make it so you can run with it and then build on it. The other piece is de-anonymizing your web traffic with tools like Albatross, the HubSpot buyer intent module, and basically use that sort of like high intent web visits to like the pricing page, case study pages, etc. from accounts. So from that account list you've been targeting, again, get that contributing to the company engagement score, account scores, etc. And then you can set up based on building a threshold of engagement on some simple intent data, build a threshold of, okay, now we're going to build some workflows with sales based on those scores, and basically trigger kind of workflows with sales to reach out, kind of dedicated outbound flows, etc. And that's a much more simple way to get started, targeting an account-based way, doing like ABM Lite, essentially, for me. And that's where I'd start. And then you can layer on things like one to few, which we can get onto.
Okay. So what I'm understanding is that yeah, you're basically starting with a bigger pool, and you are using things like intent data to basically try and make that pool much smaller, I guess, like funneling people traditionally. And then you are kind of creating that ABM list, and you're using it based on actual data of companies that are engaging with you.
Yeah.
So you're starting with traditional marketing, seeing people that are coming onto the site. Tools like Albacross are going to tell you that. Seeing using tools like Fibbler that's going to show people that are in your CRM because they've signed up for something, or they've downloaded something, they've subscribed to a webinar or something like that. And now this list is getting smaller, and you will get to that kind of typically banded around number of like 100 accounts. And you think, right, now we're going to go hard on those 100 accounts because they've shown the most intent. You bring in sales, and yeah, maybe you can start targeting them with some specific ads. So you're kind of, rather than starting by picking the 100 accounts almost at random, you're using more traditional marketing and also intent data marketing to get that 100 list. Is that a good way to describe it?
Yeah, I think that's fair. From my side, it's really about kind of like once we start targeting in an account-based way, so we have that account list, like we can look at, obviously that our campaigns are probably going to be geared towards converting via a demo form, et cetera, still like a normal kind of campaign, like talking purely from a paid sense at the moment. So we're still going to be looking at that. But what I'm saying is you can use it like simple, more like easy lift sources of intent data to build kind of relevant kind of indicators of they could be showing intent, and building simpler workflows with sales where kind of you build workflows of like them reaching out. You build like follow-up sequences for those specific people who are reaching certain thresholds. And then you start factoring in all the different ways that you can engage those specific accounts. So showing intent. It's not as complex as like a big, like fancy ABM program, but I think that's a lot more sustainable, and that's something you can build on as a startup. And then you can think about all the ways to engage that account, and think about what's realistic within your resources. And then away from that, once you've kind of got that foundation set up, that's when you can look at, within my account list. So a good example for us in Rocket SaaS actually is that we have our account list that we are targeting. And we have small segments within that we typically do really well in. So we have a lot of clients in like construction SaaS, for example, don't we? Mm-hmm. Who we do really good work for. So like, for example, if I know that my kind of core campaigns are set up and I've got like different strategies across different channels to target that account list and go after them, then I can also look to expand out into, let's build one to few campaigns based on either shared characteristics like their industry, or shared kind of technographics. And maybe you've got specific clients that have, it's really relevant for SaaS, like you have specific clients that have a specific tool that integrates well with yours. You can create campaigns around that. Or maybe just like clients have a shared challenge and shared pains, and you can create one to few campaigns around that. So you can layer that on, but that's still like smaller clusters within the account list, but not the one-to-one like level of like, we've got 200 accounts and I've made 200 landing pages for each one. And now we've got like a dinner, and we're trying to get every person in that 200 accounts to the dinner. And like we've got, on top of that, we're building like a special webinar and product demo for each, and we're going to send that out. And like, you see how complex it can get. And my argument is there's a much simpler, go with like that ABM Lite, that kind of targeting in an account-based way. Maybe layering on some one to few campaigns, which is kind of smaller clusters of accounts within that larger account list. Focus there, build relevant workflows of sales with simple intent data. And then to me, that's a much firmer and easier foundation for a smaller business than trying to do the crazy ABM plays, and restricting your reach so much that you're never really going to convert anyone anyway, because you just get fighting against buying dynamics.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that if you are a small business and you don't have the resources and the big budget to use these expensive intent data platforms, you could go to do an ABM play, and you could put a lot of your time and focus into it, which would take your focus away from some of the other things that you were doing. And you could be pretty disappointed, because at the end of the day, if you don't have the data and the budget to use those tools, you are just going to be picking essentially a pretty random bunch of companies, and there's a 95% chance that they're not going to be in market, because only 5% of people are in market at the same time. So you've just kind of got excited and wasted a bit of time. So you're much better off investing your time in targeting a bigger group of companies, still being targeted and not spreading the net too wide. But you're better off targeting a larger group of companies with great content, great ads, traditional funnels and demand generation plays, and then using those intent data signals to understand how that audience is getting smaller, getting ready to be in that buying mode. And then you start sort of doing those kind of ABM plays of sending more tailored content and getting sales involved.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's like what it comes down to, like I said, is that like if you can do it, like great, like brilliant. I think the main thing I'm trying to get across is that I don't think people think they need to be doing ABM, and that's not necessarily true. And I think there's alternatives to pure ABM where you're kind of going after one-to-one accounts and you've got one-to-one, one-to-few, one-to-many. I think for a startup and a scale up, if you want to target in an account-based way, you can build a wider account list and start targeting that list. You can build workflows with sales based on simple, more easy to source intent data. And then you can also start layering in one-to-few campaigns as well. And that's a lot easier for a small marketing team to run than running a pure ABM play. And it gives you the foundations to build an ABM program later. I just think as well, like the temptation from a lot of companies is, we'll get these like few hundred accounts and we'll work them. And if our marketing's good enough, we'll get them. We're going to get those accounts. But reality is buying dynamics, there's going to be a certain percentage of those accounts in market in most cases. And so you're just limiting yourself and you're limiting your ability to convert. And I think that hampers people's growth. And that's why I was so keen to get it across.
Okay, well, controversial one potentially.
Everyone's going to hate me.
So, well, if you do disagree with Jamie and you hate him, then please find him on LinkedIn.
Yeah, like and subscribe.
Have you ever had a LinkedIn troll?
No. Oh, yeah. Actually, no. One I can't talk about. I think I had a guy at my old company who like just kept badgering me for some reason. But yeah, it was one of them ones.
I've got a LinkedIn troll. It's a story for another pod. I defeated him actually. Yeah, he used to troll me. He doesn't troll me anymore because I defeated him. But I need to ask my wife if I'm allowed to tell that story. But it's a great ending to the pod.
Yeah.
Tune in for my troll story, which I may reveal at one point this year. But thank you so much for listening to the SaaS Marketing Weekly podcast with me and Jamie. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give it a 5-star on whatever platform you're listening to. It really helps us grow the pod essentially. So thank you so much and see you next week.